Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on Trendspotting and how you can take control of your brand's narrative in real time using machine learning. Hosting the session today is Credera. We are a global boutique consultancy working across multiple geographies. Your speakers today are from the UK and the US. And we have deep expertise across cloud, data, business transformation, strategy, and engineering and MarTech experience too. We have worked with 35% of FTSE 100 companies, and you can see some of the logos across the screen. And the hosts for this session are going to be myself, Mariola Sebastian. I'm a managing consultant, and I specialize in delivering data and analytics and MarTech solutions. And my colleague here is Vincent Yates, our chief data scientist, who has more than 10 years experience leading world-class data science and strategy teams across industries. Some housekeeping for the session today. There is a Q&A section, so feel free to post any questions as they come to you. Kyle will be there to answer any immediate questions, and we will have a deeper Q&A at the end with the speakers. If there are any network issues, please bear with us. We will try to solve them as soon as possible. Also note that this session will be recorded and will be available later for you. Now I will hand over to Vincent to kick us off.
Thank you, Mariel. I really appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I am truly excited to be sharing with you a solution to a problem that I believe plagues virtually every company in the world. And my hope, my desire for you is that by the end of the session today, you have a better understanding for that problem, and more importantly, a better understanding of how you might go address it. So what is the problem? What is the challenge that every brand must grapple with? Well, in short, I realize this might make me sound a bit old or a bit curmudgeonly, but in short, it really is that the world has changed. The always on, always connected nature powered by iPhones and Androids and Twitter and TikTok, et cetera, has demanded that brands act differently today than they did last year, or certainly 5 or 10 years ago. And the challenge is that most organizations have yet to fully embrace that challenge, that opportunity. While we know that social media impact happens in real time, and I do mean real time, and I'll give you some examples in a second, brand responses typically do not. Think about your own organization for a second. Ask yourself, how do you go about allocating your marketing and advertising spend? Is it on the cadence of once a month? Probably not. Maybe once a quarter. More than likely, though, for the most organizations that we work with, it's on the annual schedule. Even the best companies in the world, commanding huge budgets, plan that budget schedule on a calendar year. The problem is that social media doesn't plan on a calendar year. Events happen in real time, and so must you respond. To give you a sense of when I say real time, what that really looks like. Here's a great example. Ronaldo here, obviously a famous footballer, simply takes those Coke bottles, pushes them off the screen, holds up a water bottle, and says agua. Very innocuous action. He doesn't drink Coke, he drinks water. No big deal. I'm going to take the bottles, put them aside. I'm going to drink some water. That innocuous, unplanned, unspecified event erased $5 billion worth of market capitalization for Coca Cola. $5 billion. And notice how long it took. It was the same day. Could your brand, could your team have identified that, understood it, and reacted to it in time to prevent that $5 billion market cap erosion? It's not just footballers, by the way. Elon Musk here tweets nothing more than the Doge father, and he's going to be on SNL. That action alone, that single tweet of 2 words, increased the value of Dogecoin by 20% in 24 hours. 4 times the trading volume, over 15 million trades in less than 24 hours. Could your team have identified this, caught this, noticed this, and reinforced it in 24 hours? What about Kylie Jenner? A simple tweet, a joke of sorts. In 30 minutes, the stock price fell from 18 to 17.94. 3% of that market cap eroded. And by the way, I'm not just talking about this social influencers. We all know that social influencers are important and no doubt part of your overall strategy. It could be something else though too. Here's a great example of an everyday company, Toyota, of course, make vehicles. A simple report that came out talking about how much money they donated to American Congress members and their disproportionate, relative to their competitors at least, their disproportionate amount of contribution to people who voted the wrong way in one vote. $300 million. $300 million because they donated to some campaigns. It doesn't have to be social influencers who drive these actions. We've seen that it can be positive or negative. The question that you must ask yourself, the question that you must solve for then, is how do you deal with this? If social media is happening in real time on time scales that are orders of magnitude shorter than what traditional teams, brands, and organizations have designed for, how will you address these things? Because they're not going away. Social media is only going to have a stronger presence. Influencers are going to have a stronger presence, and you must be able to react. If we ask, what is the problem? Why is it so hard to react to these things? I think that we could all agree it's probably not the data. Lots of companies out there sell you this data, from Sprinkler to Brandwatch to others as well. It's not obtaining the data. And it's not even calculating the right metrics. So once you have the data, the next thing you must do, of course, is calculate those metrics. It's not calculating the metrics that's so hard. It's not even visualizing those things. We have lots of dashboarding tools. That's not the problem. The next logical thing might be say, well, we need more people who have access to these things so we can leverage the democratization of this data, the democratization of these insights. And that really isn't the problem either. Ultimately, we believe that the core problem that you must address is insights. Despite all of us drowning in all of the data that I just described, all of the dashboards, all of the metrics that we just talked about, having quarterly, monthly, weekly reviews of this data, we are parched for insights. We don't need more data. I submit you don't need more dashboards. What you need are insights that lead to action. So how do you get to insights that ultimately drive action in your organization? And more importantly, as we discussed, these things happen in real time. So how do you do that on a time scale that is a day or a week at most? Well, let's evaluate how this typically happens today. Think of how even the very best marketing teams in the world approach this problem. They start off by they go out and they buy these social listening tools that I mentioned earlier. They configure them with the right headlines, the right tags, the right influencers, so that they can define and implement the right metrics and dashboards. They then say, well, we need everybody to be looking at these dashboards all the time. So they run trainings, they grant access, they review them in monthly reviews with their senior leadership team. They effectively try their best to get to insights. But here's the problem. None of those steps that we just went through, none of the things that the best teams do today ultimately guarantee you insights. What they ultimately get to is a place where they hope that they have enough people looking at enough dashboards that they stumble across an insight. And we at Credera don't believe that hope is a strategy. We believe that brands cannot continue this process. It's too manual, it's too slow, and ultimately too reliant on luck. Again, even if you've done all those things correctly, you have to have somebody who's on the right dashboard with the right filters at the right moment in time, looking at the right metrics so that you can find that these events are taking place. So if this isn't going to work, what will? How do we then suggest that you rely less on hope and actually implement a true strategy in this space? The answer is Trendspotting. In short, the problem that we identified a second ago is that people are terrible at finding insights and data. It's too hard to do that at scale. You effectively are asking humans, your staff, your valuable people, arguably the most valuable asset in your organization, to spend all of their time and energy going through dashboards every day, probably multiple times per day. Humans, frankly, aren't great at that. You know who are great at that, though? Computers. Computers are amazing at looking at these things all the time. Always on, 24/7, 365. They will be happy to look at every metric, every dimension, every filter you can imagine all the time, and they won't complain once. The thing is that we need computers to do that and then tell us when something has changed. Because your team, your most valuable assets, are actually amazing at something computers are terrible at. And that's creatively solving the problem. So what we say is, let's find a way to let the computers do what they're great at. Let's find a way to help your marketing team do what they're great at. And together, the organization will realize the exponential benefit of the right tools facing with the right people, and the right opportunities will naturally come out of that. So let me give you an example of how this happens in real life. Let's choose skincare, for example. It turns out, if we rewind the clock to 2019, 2020, Q1, there was a brand called CeraVe, and they were doing okay. I mean, out of the top 3 brands, they were the worst, admittedly. If you look at search volume, here's a good proxy for it on the bottom here. You can see that while they did okay, they never really competed with those top 2, Olay and Neutrogena. What's remarkable, though, is if you notice here, by the end of Q3, Q4 of 2020, suddenly something had changed. Suddenly they had moved from being the worst to the best. And the question is, what drove that? Well, what drove that is they had a really creative solution to this problem. But before I get to the answer, the second question you ought to be asking yourself is, how do other brands identify that? Again, we've seen how these single tweets, these single instances can fundamentally shift the brand, both from market capitalization, now we see in search volume and ultimately sales. The question is, how do you catch these things then? Well, we can rewind the tape and play it forward and notice what will happen. We let machines do what they're great at. The machines will every single hour go and look across all of the social sites, all of the search volumes, all of the sales, and they will ask the question, is this normal? Is this right? Has something changed? And sure enough, back on April 26th, that machine alerted us. It told us something had changed. Now, again, the question is, well, what has changed? In what way? Is it good or bad? Well, because we have all of that social, because we can see the actual text, because machine learning is so powerful these days. I can take those millions and millions or billions of tweets, all of those posts on Reddit, all of those videos online, and I can distill them down to their essence and ask the machine to tell me, well, what specifically has changed? And in this case, what had changed is there's something called TikTok, and there's some person called Hiram that changed. And so, again, think back. This is a very obvious thing now because these things have only continued. But think back to early Q1, Q2, 2020. TikTok, at least around the world, certainly in the US, was not the phenomenon that it is today. In fact, it was a very small thing still. 2020, Q2, it became the fastest downloaded app of all time. The usage and volume grew radically. In a way that had taken Facebook 10 years, they did in 1 quarter. That systemic change, coupled with this person named Hiram, actually drove an entire cult-like following on TikTok around skincare. In fact, it was so big of an event that CNN, Teen Vogue, Glossier, BuzzFeed, all were talking about this cult-like following around Hiram, around the platform TikTok, and the change he had made to the entire skincare market. We identified that via our Trendspotting tool back in April. Notice here, 5 months later, those brands had not been able to keep up. If you look at this today, it's only continued. Again, just for perspective, you see the numbers here on the top. 14 billion views in the first 5 months on TikTok under this hashtag skincare. This Hiram person, this gentleman Hiram, 1.3 billion views in the first 5 months of creating a profile. Let me make it clear on that. He created a profile in January. By the summer, he already had 1.3 billion views. Now, note, he had been an influencer, a skinfluencer, as they're called, for some number of years, leveraging YouTube. Well, on YouTube, he had 3 million to 1.3 billion. So we're talking about orders of magnitude less time, orders of magnitude larger reach and impact on the business. And so you have to figure out how you're going to address these things so that when your competitors move up like this, when a new platform like TikTok becomes all the rage that it is today, you're ready, you're prepared, and you can actually respond. So how does it work? Like, what would you do in order to do this? Well, here's our secret sauce, if you will. Step one is you have to think through, what is your data strategy? How are you going to capture your data, whether that be first party and third party? You need to figure out how you're going to actually understand what's happening in your marketplace. We need to figure out what metrics your business actually cares about. We saw some early on that there were market capitalization was really important. The stock price was really important. In the last example, we see that sales volume is probably more important and probably correlated to stock price, but you can choose the metrics that's interesting to you. So that's where you start. We then model that out and effectively come up with benchmarks. That is, out of all the signals we have, all the data sources we've identified now, which of these is truly predictive of the thing that you care about, that we identified in that step one? We let machines do what they're great at then. We wrap these things with sophisticated machine learning with AI so that you don't have to look at every dashboard, every metric across every filter all the time and hope that you stumble across these moments in time. We let the machines do that for you and then proactively tell you in step 3 there, proactively tell you what's going on. Again, April 26th, we could have told them. Within 24 hours of that Toyota example, we were able to tell them, hey, this is getting traction and going to drive your stock price in a way that you don't want and need a response. You have to be ready for it. We also then can partner with you on a quarterly basis and help you understand what's happening on the meta scale, what's happening in the macro trends, both internally that you're probably reasonably well aware of, but also externally, the part that's typically pretty hard. And then we iterate. We continue to evolve and retrain these algorithms on an ongoing basis. As things change in the marketplace, as new platforms like TikTok become available, we're able to go get data from those sources as well and integrate it seamlessly back to the overall questions that we're trying to answer here, which is, how do you drive actionable insights from this data? In short, we're better together. Really, it's the insights in that action that leads to extraordinary value. Credera via Trendspotting will help you find the insights, and that allows you to focus on the part that you're no doubt amazing at, which is turning those insights into action, creatively finding the right campaigns, the right messaging that will resonate with your target audiences. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mariola, who will talk more about exactly what that means and how we go about finding those actionable insights that will lead to that extraordinary value. Mariola?
Thank you, Vincent. So, as you have heard, there is a lot to find. There's a lot of insight to be found in all this data, but there's also massive amounts of data to be found on social media and to sift through to find this insight. So the obvious question is, how do we do this? Where do we even start? And the obvious answer is, how do you deal with all this data? Well, you need a scalable cloud-based architecture to be able to understand and process all this data. And you need to use machine learning to make sense of all the different variables, the data, the metadata that's going on. So once we have all that in place, we can dive deeper into the structures and perform a new type of analysis that we have split into 3 levels. So in the first place, we have the user level. For these, we analyze several industry-validated metrics across a wide spectrum of demographic and sociographic measures. And essentially, the user-level analysis allows us to identify influencers or accounts that are performing or outperforming other accounts and that are becoming more influential for your brand. So in the example that Vincent told us earlier of Skincare by Hiram, he was becoming the highest performing influencer in TikTok. And interestingly, out of all of the other influencers, what we noticed is that, yes, influencers are usually do great in social media because that is what they do. They do social media. And brands usually rely on influencers to understand social media, navigate social media, and create content of social media. That's why social media marketing is such a big part of marketing budgets nowadays. What we did notice is The Ordinary actually outperforms a lot of these influencers because of how well they understood social media and how well they took advantage of the skinfluencer trends on TikTok. So at the user level, we can identify those two things. So how well your brand is performing against other brands as an individual account, and how other influencers are performing with each other so that you can understand who to collaborate with, and also which influencers are beneficial to your brand and which ones are being beneficial to other brands. At the next level, we analyze the content. So at the content level, what we are looking is natural language processing, understanding what are the different opinions, what is driving engagement, and what type of engagement is it driving? Is it positive? Is it negative? It's not enough to just say, oh, we're getting a high volume of engagement, but is it good or bad engagement? Are people tweeting a lot about you? Are people posting a lot about you on Instagram? Is it good or is it bad? And there are a lot of tools in the market that allow you to understand at a given point in time what is your sentiment like, but it's less easy to understand how the different initiatives that you took on social media or even in the general media affect the brand perception. And we can give you that historical view so you can see in retrospect, how did I perform when I did this? What things impacted my brand that maybe weren't things I did, that maybe were things that just happened in the news that were adjacent to my brand. And the way we do this is by using industry-specific data sets. So most other sentiment analysis tools will just provide a generic score based on a basic language model. What we do is we train our own models based on your specific industry. So if you're in the skincare industry, you're going to need a very different model from someone who's in the utilities industry and is looking at water outages, not at makeup. So we obtain those industry training data sets, we train our specific model, and then we are able to provide with a lot more accuracy whether some content is having a positive or negative impact on your brand. And I wanted to talk you through one example. So this is a view of what the Boots history looked like over a few months. And one of the things we noticed is that there had been a huge dip on around the time where they opened their flu jab booking service. So we dug a bit deeper to understand exactly what had happened. And what happened is that they opened their flu jab booking service early due to demand because of COVID, which was great and people were excited about and posting on social media. It was great for Boots to be seen as a brand that people rely on and that they could respond appropriately when they were needed. So to provide a fast response during COVID times. However, when people went to book into their website and they went into the customer journey flow, they realized that no matter which branch they went into, so over 65 or under 65, there was just no availability. These caused a lot of confusion in social media. People didn't understand why it was being announced that flu jobs were open and then going into the website they weren't open. So as we all do, we take to social media to complain when we are unhappy with the brand, hoping that they will hear us and maybe fix it. But it turned out that the Boots UK account was not being monitored by Boots. So they were getting 300 messages a day, people very angry, really low sentiment, no response from the brand. And even those people who were able to get bookings, when they were able to access those bookings, they were getting odd messages saying that they hadn't attended the bookings or that 2 bookings had been booked. And if Boots had been monitoring the social media, they would have understood that there were problems with their system and they would have been able to address them a lot faster. Now on to the last level, so looking at the community level. For these, we are leveraging anomaly detection. So what we do is monitor the social media performance of a user or a brand or their competitors and try to identify events that have been significant. So whether it's on the sentiment or on the level of engagement. And the example we have here is an AOC tweet who she's a politician in the US, and she made a tweet about her skincare, which is obviously not her area of expertise, and she's not an influencer for that reason. But she does have a large following, and making a tweet about her skincare actually had an impact on people wanting to try that skincare for themselves. We detected that anomaly, as you can see in number 2, and then we can see that it actually had a later impact in CeraVe's weekly sales data, which was above their predicted sales. So we can find that there was an anomaly, and then we can trace it back to the root cause of this tweet. Now, I will hand over back to Vincent to bring this all together.
Thanks, Mariella. And I think what's really interesting about this example in particular is a little subtlety, which is, notice the dates here. Notice that the notifications, the identification of those tweets happened back in late January. And notice that the sales happened in March. This is a problem that I think a lot of companies have. That is, the thing they leverage in order to understand, is their business performing well or not, is truly a lagging indicator. That is, by the time you realize something has happened, it's a bit too late. So back to the point of what challenge are we trying to solve? It's fundamentally that the world has changed and we have to do things differently. Now, in this case, we have to be able to identify this tweet is going to drive sales. In another example that we have from a large telco, they leveraged a metric called AAU, Attitudes, Awareness, and Understanding. That is, this was a survey that they would send to their customers, their subscribers, every quarter, and that result would ultimately drive, hey, we're doing really well in our marketing, or we need to improve, or here are the segments that we have and opportunities that we have to go do better. The challenge is, A, it's a survey, so it's expensive, and 2, it's a lagging indicator. By the time that you receive the survey, the event has already taken place. You've already formed your opinion about whether you like this company or you don't. That's the nature of the survey. What do you think about this company is the question being asked. Past tense. Imagine that you didn't have to survey people and you could save some money. Imagine that you didn't ask them what they already thought because their opinions are already made up. Imagine that you don't have to wait for the next quarter. And by the way, you do it once a quarter. Of course, you just the survey. Those results have to be collected, analyzed. You're really talking about roughly 6 months after the event took place. What if you didn't have to wait 6 months to find out how you did? What if today I could tell you these campaigns are working well, these are not? These are the challenges your clients, your customers are facing right now that you can address in real time, not 6 months after the fact. Well, one of the things we do, as I mentioned earlier, is we choose the metric that you care about, whether that be stock price, whether that be sales, whether that be search volume, or in this case, AAU. And what we do is, again, leveraging a wide range of really cool statistical techniques here, from dynamic time warping is a cool named one to others more standard cross-time dimension correlational analysis. What we do is we figure out which of these signals will truly give you insight into that ahead of time, turning those lagging indicators into leading. And so we took their metric and we measured it across all the things that we can get in real time. From YouTube likes to views to social sentiment that you just heard about to all of the other things. We then can stitch that all back together and give you real-time insights about what's happening right now. And so a great example of how this ultimately comes together, how we quantify all of those signals and outcomes, we can see back in October here that in fact they had a dip. This social sentiment in particular showed us that people were not as happy as they typically were. Something had changed. And exactly like that survey example with hiring, where we saw a change for the positive in that case, we're able to ask the computer not only to monitor and tell them something changed, which it did, we're able to ask it what specifically changed, what is different at this moment in time. And what we see is this negative sentiment was being driven by customer service in particular. Customer service in particular. And you would see people verbatims like horrible customer service degraded, poor customer service is inexcusable, and so on and so forth. The list goes on, of course, which allowed us to take that to them and say, there's something wrong with your customer service at the moment. Something has changed as perceived by your customers. So this is where you can then pull in your own internal data. This is where humans are amazing at really good at solving the problem. We could go figure out, do you have higher volumes? Do you have more people on vacation? With COVID, of course, going on these days, are there more people out because of illness, etc.? These are the things that you can ultimately then address in real time so that you don't have to wait 6 months for them to have already made up their mind they don't like your brand anymore. You can address it in real time. You can respond to it. You can understand what's driving the confusion, what's driving the problem in the case of Boots, right? Why is there some confusion here? What's the consternation that our clients and customers are feeling, and how do we address that in real time? Because again, social media happens in real time. The question is, will your brand happen in real time or not? So with that, we're going to turn it over to you all. We covered a fair amount of material today. I think it's quite provocative in some cases and quite interesting in others. What questions do you all have? How can we help?
Thank you, Vincent and Mariola. I've been collecting some questions in the background. I would say we don't have too many, but some interesting ones nonetheless. So I will just go through these in the order that they have been received. So the first one, maybe best to go straight to you, Vincent, given that you're there, but Mariola, feel free to comment as well if you wish. The first question is, can I replace my social media department with Trendspotting?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think anytime that you talk about automation or even the hint of automation, the natural place is, hey, our computer's going to take over my job. And I think, from my perspective, it's a reasonable question. But in this case, the answer is no, fundamentally no. Remember that I said the real power is when you let machines do what they're great at, which is monitoring all of these data sources all the time across all the dimensions, all the countries you're in, all the channels you're on, etc. Let the computers do that. They're amazing at that. They're really, really good at that. What humans are really great at is taking that and synthesizing and figuring out what to do in response. How are we going to address this? What's on point with our brand and our messaging? So in no way are we going to replace your own team. In fact, what we're going to do is augment them with the right data at the right moment in time to help them be more efficient and more effective at the end of the day. That's really the power here. Because when you take the machines, you let them do what they're good at, you take the people and you let them do what they're great at, that's how you unlock that extraordinary value. Good question, though.
Thank you, Vincent. Mariola, we'll come to you for the next one. How techie does your social media team need to be able to use this tool? What would they do in the equation once they receive the information, or is this normally sent to senior leadership to deal with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way we've developed Trendspotting is that your team can be anywhere from not technical at all to very technical and get different value from the tool. So if your team is not technical at all, we can provide not only the dashboards, but also we are your strategic partnership. So we are the ones who can help you find the value for your specific data and for your specific industry. And if your team is more technical, then the tool has a lot of capability for you to dig in. We provide an API for you to use the models that we train for sentiment analysis, for example, and you can always build an ecosystem of tools that are useful for you that start from the Trendspotting technology. Vincent, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about Credera offering something like this is that fundamentally, at our core, that is, we are in the client service business. That is, we like to think of ourselves as strategic partners to you and your organizations. Said differently, we can really help meet you wherever you are on that journey. In fact, if you wanted to go to the extreme case and say, hey, I don't even have a social, I don't even have a marketing team, perhaps, I'm sure you do. But let's just say you go to the extreme case, I don't have a marketing team. Well, as you saw early on with that Mario showed you that slide, actually behind us, we have the entire power of Omnicom, which is a global company, huge number of agencies from PR to crisis to marketing to ad agencies, etc., that we could help you leverage behind the scenes as well. So really anything from we do everything for you, all the way to you have 99% of the stuff, and what you really want are the actionable insights. You want the machines to do what they're great at so that your people can do what they're great at. We can meet you wherever you are. And I think that's sort of the power of having Credera behind a tool like this.
Thank you both. Vincent, we'll stick with you because you're on screen. I presume you don't think current trend tools are sufficient, for example, Brandwatch or Talkwalker?
Yeah, and so I talked a bit about this earlier too, and I think, look, I think they're really good tools. I do. I think they're very good tools. There's nothing wrong with those tools. The problem, though, really at its core is that it's not data at the end of the day. Those tools are amazing at providing you data at scale. That's really good, and that's necessary, but it's insufficient. While necessary, it is not sufficient. And so what I mean by that is we are all really drowning in that data. What we're parched for are the insights. The thing those tools aren't able to provide you today is really the actual actionable insights that you can take and drive new action. They'll gladly tell you, here are all the tweets, here are all the posts, here's all the Reddit forms, so on and so forth. They happily provide that data to you. The question is your team capable? Is your team ready to figure out how to make sense of all of that? I think what I often see, and this is no knock on any of those tools, but what I often see is that marketing teams aren't data science teams. They aren't technology teams. They aren't all of the necessary things to make data truly actionable. They're marketing teams. They're really good at marketing. And so what we say is, like, let marketing teams do what they're great at. Let machines do what they're great at. Let data scientists do what they're great at. And really, when you pull all those things together, what Trendspotting does is allow marketing teams to do what they're great at, which is focus on how do I respond to these? How do I address it? And how do I help my customers and my clients at the end of the day? Because that's really what you're in the business of, helping your customers.
Thank you. We'll just keep working through these questions then. Mariola, what is unique about trend spotting and how does it differ from current social trend analysis?
Yeah, I think we touched a bit on this. So I think the main thing is that what these trend analysis tools they give you is they give you these dashboards. Sometimes it's a point in time, so you can't really see how different factors have factored into what you're seeing. And you also get to an extent detached from the actual social media that's happening. So you have your Hootsuite that's orchestrating all your social media posts, and then you have your Brandwatch at the end getting all the data, and you're never actually interacting with the users that are on your social media because you have this end-to-end workflow that's completely detached from social media. So I think what we bring is as we said, that strategic partnership that Credera brings in, where we can look at the whole journey and at all those interactions between your social media tools, and also provide that context that you might be missing from using those tools.
Thank you. I think we're down to our last two questions now, unless any more start coming in. This next one is, well, maybe quite straightforward. We'll see. Can I quit buying social listening tools if I work with Credera and Trendspotting? You might both have an opinion on that, but Mariola's on screen, so maybe Mariola first.
Yeah, I think it's a really straightforward one. So like Vincent said, social monitoring tools are great. they're great if you can use them and if you understand the limited scope that they have. But they do have limited scope. So if you want to do more, and if you want to get the right insights, and if you want to get the right depth, then you're going to need more than those tools. So I would say the answer is yes. Trendspotting can provide a lot of that insight, and at the same time, it's customizable enough that if there is an input that you think it's missing, it can be integrated into the tool. Because again, we are a delivery partner, so it's not a product that you just buy, you plug it in, and it's there for you to use. It's a partnership, it's a work in progress, and we make it work for you. Vincent, want to add something?
Yeah, I think that was a good summary. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question on a couple of fronts. One, it depends on, I guess, like my answer is, I'm a statistician by trade, so forgive me, but the answer is, of course, it depends, right? And what I mean by that is it depends on how you're using those tools. Look, if you're leveraging social tools like Hootsuite, for example, in order to schedule and coordinate and respond to social media from your own social media response team, for example, Trendspotting are not going to do that for you. Like, frankly, this is not designed for one-off questions to your company. If you're only using those tools to capture the data so that you can go create some metrics, so that you can put them in a dashboard, so that you can ask somebody to look at the dashboards all the time and try and find insights, then 100% stop doing that, please. Here's a better way, an easier way, a faster way, and a more effective way to do that. Again, the core of Trendspotting is how do you identify what's going on faster, more efficiently, and more accurately than you could possibly do with any of those tools. So in that case, absolutely, you could stop using those things. Because they're just, I think, at the end of the day, most of those tools are premised around the idea that a dashboard is the end state. And I'm telling you, I'm sure you've experienced this as well, dashboards are not the end state. Somebody has to interpret what that dashboard means. Somebody has to understand that this metric wiggling in the way it currently is wiggling is a good thing or a bad thing or a non-event. That's what Trendspotting does for you at scale and in real time, and frankly, all the time.
Thank you both. Vincent, we'll stick with you. There's still a couple of questions filtering in, but this one is, you say real time, but is it actually?
Yeah, I do say real time a lot, don't I? Yeah, so what does that mean? What do I mean by real time? If you're a computer scientist, I am not talking about real time to you. What I'm talking about is real time to the average person. The way that I really think about what does real time mean is a little bit differently. Said specifically, what I'm saying is the fastest that you could possibly act on data, we will provide you data faster than that cadence. Right? So think about this. If it's going to take you, I don't know, think an hour or 2 hours or maybe a day in order to craft a response to something happening in the marketplace, run it by your legal team, for example, run it by your PR team, for example, actually go get that on the social handle and respond, anything faster than that will certainly be real time to you. Now, when I say real time to a computer scientist, they might be thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have the stream architecture, et cetera. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is any time that something happens, we're gonna be able to tell you very, very quickly that it's happened faster than you could possibly have via dashboards. And it will be fast enough so you can actually respond to it in the marketplace, assuming everything on the backside of that works. So when I say real time, no, I don't mean in a computer science way real time. What I'm really saying is faster than anything you have today, and it will seem as though it is actually computer science, right? Real time, because you won't be able to act any faster than we give it to you. Hopefully that was clear. Feel free to add anything, Mariel, if you want to clarify that any, or maybe it was clear enough.
I think.
Okay.
I think that's clear then, Vincent, by the sounds of it. Okay. It looks like questions have stopped filtering in, so there's just this one last one. We'll stick with you for this one, Vincent. Could a company build a Trendspotting solution themselves, technically speaking?
Sure. I mean, The answer is we've built it. So in theory, you can build it yourself. Now, like I say that a bit in jest. What I'm really saying is what we've done here is architected a solution that ingests a huge amount of data at massive scale. I mean, just think about all of the videos on TikTok that we're downloading, parsing, transcribing, and understanding. Think of all the tweets that your brand has, people talking about you, people talking to you, you talking to people, your competitors, etc. It's an enormous amount of data that we have to go collect. Now, can companies do that? Of course you could do that. In fact, that's a lot of what the social tools do for you is they automate that piece of it. Not all the channels, for example, most don't have TikTok, but most of the channels they'll have. Terrific. Now the question is, once you have that data, what do you do with it? You're talking about sitting on, gigabytes, hundreds of gigabytes, possibly terabytes of data just for your brand. What do you do with it? How do you make sense of it? Well, again, we at our core are a technology consulting firm. So we have data engineers, we have cloud engineers, we have data scientists who are really good at managing really large scale data. So we then process all of that data. We're doing clever things like Mariola told you around sentiment analysis. We've built custom bespoke sentiment tools that don't work out of the box. The out of the box stuff just doesn't work, frankly. You have to have something bespoke to social media because the links are shorter. The way people talk is different. You have to have it bespoke to the industry. A great example here is think about if you asked, a sentiment tool in general, is the word cake good or bad? Just that word. Is it a positive word or a negative word? Well, it's just an object, it's a noun, so it may not have any real emotion, but in general, actually, I think we'd all agree, at least my wife would certainly tell me, cake is a good thing. My kids would certainly tell me, cake is a great thing, right? So in general, you'd see caking and cake as a good thing. Now, when you think about cake in the context of skincare, it's actually a really bad thing. You don't want your makeup to cake. You don't want it to show in that caking way. And so again, like how do you understand that those tweets are actually negative when in general it's positive? Well, we have to go build bespoke models for all of that. We have to go parse all of those videos. So again, think if you had the videos from TikTok, you had the videos from YouTube, etc. What good are those? Like in their core form as a video, what good are those? You're not going to ask a human to transcribe them. You're not going to ask a human what they're about. You're not going to ask a human to go watch and see, is there any product placement in these? Well, we can use computer vision algorithms to go do that. We can use machine learning to go do all of that. And we have people who are really gifted at those skills. And so at the end of the day, what we've done is we've taken a lot of really sophisticated techniques on really large scale data and distilled it down to its essence. That is, what are the actionable insights out of this? Now, could you go do that yourself? Undoubtedly. You could go hire data scientists, you could hire data engineers, you get a whole team focused around these things and spend millions of dollars in R&D. Or you could just buy the thing effectively, right? You could focus your energy on the things that differentiate your business and be really great at those things and leverage other people who focus on different things to do that for you. So in essence, yes, of course you could build it because we've built it, right? So yes, you definitely could. But most organizations aren't actually going to be able to because they don't actually have the people we just described to go do that for them. And frankly, there wouldn't be a huge advantage to doing it yourself.
Thanks, Vincent. Pretty tough one to end on, I guess. But that is it for questions. So I'll hand it back to you guys to wrap up.
Yeah, well, thank you again. Really excited to be chatting with you today. Thank you all for joining us. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the questions too. I like the tough ones, no doubt. If you have other questions, if you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to us. Here are our email addresses. You can also get to us on LinkedIn. You can get to us on Twitter. Of course, we're monitoring social, no doubt. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. And feel free to reach out if you have anything else that we can do to help.